Welcome to Bonn Park.
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 Welcome to Bonn Park. I'm Sara Geidlinger. This is week 6 of Marshall not joining me to introduce the podcast because we are staying safe and staying home, and I hope you are too. But rest assured, he was very much involved in this episode we recorded a while back with Tristan Everett of Iron Horse Tattoo. He's also just a down-to-earth, nice human who tells us his story of how his work and his shop became one of the most in demand in the region. Local guy, local shop name. Here's Tristan Everett. Okay, welcome, Tristan. It's so nice to meet you.
Thank you. You too.
I'm going to go ahead and ask the question, how did you guys meet?
Tristan is the son of an artist I know named Mary Everett. I've known her for years. And when Tristan opened up his own tattoo studio in Waterloo called Iron Horse Tattoo, she thought it would make for a great newspaper column in the Waterloo Chronicle. So I headed over and met Tristan. And I had been in many tattoo parlors over the years in various cities, and I've always loved them and been fascinated by how diversified they are. And what really blew me away was how Tristan's parlor was such a welcoming, warm environment, kind of like a cigar den or a place you would drink
I
scotch.
read that in your article. I could actually feel it. I've never been there myself. I hope to come, but I could feel it when I was reading your article.
I think you've since moved.
Yeah, I do have a new location that
I gotta come
haven't
check out.
seen yet. That more like in the main core now, right on Regina and DuPont, across from the old Legion building. So
That's a great location. Yeah.
Used to be Holly Oaks was there. So
Awesome.
What I really enjoyed about that interview, as we're about to launch into a new interview, is how Tristan was just an all-round artist. He had his paintings up, in his which clearly influences also his tattoo work, and just how much we just chatted, not so much as a writer trying to interview a tattoo artist, but rather just chatting as artists about work. And I've always been fascinated by the medium of tattoo.
Me too.
The stakes are so high working on flesh.
it's definitely high stress.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. Like, how'd you get started? Are you from the region? Tell us all.
So I am from Waterloo. I guess how I got started, I sort of had an opportunity to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I was working for a family business for most of my life, and my dad was getting close to retirement, and we kind of knew that I didn't want to be his successor or anything like that, so he gave me an opportunity to figure out what I wanted to do.
What did Dad do? What was the business?
We were in the transportation industry.
Cool.
So heavy truck.
Yep.
So I took some time and did some reflecting. I drove out west for 3 months and across Canada with my dog and my truck, and just toured around and visited friends and family. I had previously lived in Calgary for a year working on an oil rig.
That's a different life.
Yeah, definitely different. It's you earn your wage, that's for sure. But I came back. I had booked a tattoo at another studio, and I guess the night before my tattoo, I actually ran into a friend that had just gotten a tattoo, and asked where they had gotten it, and they said so and so, which was my previous artist that I was trying to find, but I had always thought that he had moved back home, which was South Carolina. He's originally from the States, and or North Carolina, I should say. And I found out he had just opened up Powerhouse Tattoos in Kitchener, which was the old circus room.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Sorry, super familiar with the circus room.
Yeah, so I was like, blown away that he was back in town, but I did follow through with my other appointment that I had booked with that artist, because it's definitely a big faux pas to cancel on a tattoo artist, the night before or the day of, or even a couple days before.
We get it. Marshall and I are
drives-
self-employed. We get it.
Drives us nuts. And basically, I've had, shouted many profanities in the air, based on those situations. So I followed through with the appointment, but then I went and I visited him and chatted about getting some more work done after this piece, and kind of felt inspired in the space. And I had always drawn my whole life, and I went back and I went to Michael's and grabbed a new sketch pad and some pencils, and I stayed up all night drawing. I drew for hours, and it's like, it didn't feel like a task or anything, and felt only like 30 seconds went by, and like
it was magical. You
8
were bit
hours
by
had
this
gone
inspiration.
by,
Yeah.
So I went back and approached him and said, hey, like, I'd love the opportunity to do an apprenticeship, but I understand that I need to earn that right. So maybe I can be your so-called shop bitch, in hopes of starting an apprenticeship one day. So, he thought about it for a couple days and then decided to take me on, and really the rest just flew by. I basically dove right in and committed myself, 110%, 7 days a week, 12, 14 hours a day, just nonstop working, because I was already 27 at this point. So I realized that I needed to get a career going. So I took it very seriously.
You weren't taking it lightly. That's what I was about to say.
And
yeah.
I just put and you know what? When I was first starting there drawing, my work wasn't very good. It just, I hadn't drawn with like professional intention before. It was always just for fun. So I'd never had anyone, pick my work apart or critique it. And, it just took focus and a thick hide, because definitely a lot of criticism, and sometimes the way us tattoo artists deliver criticism isn't always a nice way. It's
For
not
sure,
like your
yeah.
teacher in school, like, hey, why don't you try harder? It's more
It's not
like
suggestive. It's
like, what's with this expletive
Yeah.
deleted,
They don't start with the competition is really great. Let's talk about maybe you could take it a little bit further.
So it doesn't, so you definitely have to have a thick hide and just realize that, try and interpret their words in a different way. But yeah, you just draw it and then draw it again and draw it again and draw it again. And you know what? I did it, and it I never had like a, go screw yourself buddy moment. It was always like, okay, well, he's, just trying to make me better. And I just always looked at it that way, and it never felt like work. And I did anything and everything for that studio, and I didn't get paid a dime until I actually started earning as an artist.
right.
I did get paid, percentage based on the work that I did, but everything leading up to that was all basically labor and trade for an education in tattooing. So kind of an old school apprenticeship, right?
I was going to say, it takes a lot of guts to walk in there and say, will you take me on? I'll do anything. I will scrub
Yeah.
your toilets.
Yeah, that's
But
what I did.
maybe did your age factor in? You weren't 19. You weren't, 19-year-olds.
Probably, because
yeah.
he had the young guys come in before that just wanted to be there because it was a cool place to be,
sure,
and it had that kind of rock star persona, and he could tell that, like, I wanted to learn, and I was there to learn and get better at, master a craft, right?
Right.
I didn't go there to, hang out and party. There were few and far times between where I ever even had, drinks with the other artists after a long week of work, because guess what? I was going in the next day, even if everyone else had the next day off. I was still going.
Cleaning up, setting up, making sure everyone's stations were ready to go.
That was every day. Scrub the studio. As soon as you get in, you're there hours before anyone, and then you're there working the whole time while they're working, and then you're there after they're working.
It sounds like a sumo wrestling dojo or something.
Yeah, pretty much. Live there. Yeah, and then you
the
all
young
eat,
boys have to.
and then you all eat a big soup at the end, right? Just
I can't imagine that very early stage where you're working on people for the first time, and kind of
nerve-wracking.
Yeah,
for sure.
like it has to begin somewhere. But
my first and second clients were my left thigh. myself. So I tattooed myself. And then
What's that like? Sorry to talk over
that
you.
is, well, there's so much buildup and anticipation to finally doing your first tattoo. Because you've been around it, for, hundreds or thousands of hours, and you've seen it happen, and the ins and outs of how a machine works, but there's still this disconnect on how does that machine feel when it hits skin, which is kind of what I was always thinking about is, what is this going to be like? Is it going to be like drawing with a pen or a pencil? Or a paintbrush? Like, what is it going to be like? And there's nothing you can compare it to. It's its own thing. It's like, imagine having a piece of paper that is kind of, or stretched like a drum skin, let's say. And if you poke too far, you're going to bury that needle too deep, and your ink's going to shoot under the subdermis of the skin. And if you don't go far enough, you're not going to get good line saturation and density, or if you're shading, mag saturation or density. The mag is the term for the shading needles that we use that look like big flat paintbrushes. Right. And line is your real thin liner. So
you can't take an acrylic gesso and just paint back over it.
Nope, one chance, and you can only work the skin so much before you need to let it heal, and you can come back to it, or else you'll scar the person, or it's definitely different than anything. It's its own thing. And I do think that you can practice other mediums to hone your skills, but to me, I want to get as good as I can at tattooing, so I tattoo as much as I can. I do a massive volume of work for one person.
When you were talking about there's nothing like the ink to the skin, and what's that, like you said, the first few times that you do it, and you're not sure what your finished product is going to be. And then Marshall mentioned the acrylic paint. Like, I've created some poor art in my life, and I can say for a fact, acrylic paint, I tried like once or twice, and I was like, I can't work with this. I have no idea what I'm doing. It's not doing what oil paint does. Yeah. So even just those tiny differences,
very different. Yeah. So it's something that you have to practice with over and over and over. And the most interesting thing I find about tattooing is, like with painting, you have like basically a control where your canvas is the same all the time. When you're tattooing a human, depending on their skin type, their age, the spot on their body, we have different types of skin all over our body. Whether your skin's at a joint, it's more stretchy because it needs to move, or it's not at a joint, it's tighter. Back skin's very thick and tough, like it's almost like it's got some natural protection there, and all those factors are different on every individual, so you really don't have the same situation every time you're tattooing someone, whereas when you're painting, same canvas every time. The size could change, but really you've got same canvas, so how that paintbrush is going to react when you put it on the canvas, whereas with tattooing it's very different. There are similarities throughout everyone in the different areas of the body, but it is an ever evolving canvas.
And what about something like The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, somebody who's that
muscular, yeah.
Muscular, also a darker skin tone, right?
Yeah, so darker skin tones, typically you want to use higher contrast, obviously, because I always use the analogy of, take like a brown piece of construction paper and draw on it with a black crayon. There's your contrast. Or take a white or, lighter Caucasian skin tone and draw on it with a black crayon. You're going to have way more contrast there. You're also going to lose mid-tones with that darker skin. So what you want to do is go higher contrast. So, harder blacks with lighter areas in between, to create your form. And maybe you skip some of your mid-tones so that it's got more contrast. That's what I've found to be most successful.
There's no way to know this without experience, is what I'm guessing. without getting in there and trying.
Experience or having a a rearing from someone that had lots of experience in it. So the guy I learned from, Grove, he living in North Carolina and working in South Carolina, way more exposure to different ethnicities and skin types and colors, right? So he had a lot of experience with darker skin tones because of the area where he lived. And I always remember what he said about, higher contrast, harder lines. If you're doing that style of tattoo, maybe you want to use a thicker line because it's bolder, right? It'll stand out better on those darker skin tones.
I actually never even thought of that before. Yeah.
With regards to subject matter, I guess you see things like the one I can think of is like for years, I don't know when this was, but the Tasmanian Devil tattoo kind of
classic.
Came. And it's probably, you don't see people requesting that anymore.
No. When I started tattooing, that was a common one to fix up or cover up. So yeah, I earlier in my career covered a lot of what are referred to as tramp stamps. Lots of armbands, like
the tribal armband,
or barbed wire armband. Tons of those still being covered.
Winnie the Pooh, I would assume there's some of those out there.
There's so many. I did have covered some unicorns.
I'm not sure how
it's funny because those are actually coming back now.
Oh yeah.
But the way that they're being tattooed and rendered is far different, like to another level where the classic wizard tattoos and stuff like that. It's being done, but it's being done in a pretty phenomenal way. Every day I look through Instagram, or there's a new crazy artist being featured from Siberia or Korea has many phenomenal artists. So the sky's the limit these days with what you're able to do with tattooing.
From what I can tell, with sports people particularly, the first thing they've done is a tribal tattoo, and it's very thick and opaque, right?
Yep.
And then you see them add to it as though to try to cover it up, but it's clearly there. You can't.
Yeah, it's very hard to cover those big black areas. I'm lucky to be busy enough now that I don't even do cover-ups anymore, because I don't feel like I'm able to put out what I want to put out when I'm dealing with something in the way. I always use, again, like another analogy I use with people is I don't go to Michael's and buy the canvas with stuff all over it.
It's not paint by numbers.
I buy the blank one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. So I will work with people if they're willing to get some lasering done, and then we can have, we've got, we're going to have better success with our cover up if they can get those hard black tones to like a medium gray tone. Well, now I can use black and it will cover it. Whereas the only thing that can cover black ink when you're doing black and gray work is black ink. So you just end up with massive large black areas, and sometimes it's just not going to be successful.
I've seen online a few times, like Instagram or wherever, somebody might have, male or female, an entire black sleeve.
Yeah, blackout.
Is blackout? Is that what that's called?
Yeah.
Is that cover up, or is that just a choice?
A lot of the times it's a cover up.
Yeah, because it looks freaking cool. Like when I see it, I'm like, wow, that's awesome.
I've also seen like they'll take like a negative pattern and run it throughout, and your old existing tattoos will fill in those patterns. So I've got this cool Japanese sleeve that has color all over it. If you took hard black areas and then you left like a negative lotus shape in here or something, this color would poke through, right?
So creative. I love it.
So you can do a lot. You can also do what's called white over black now. So it was kind of previously believed that you can't put anything over black ink. But you can, but it's just going to take many, many applications to make it successful. So people are now taking they're doing these blackout sleeves, and then they're taking a design and punching white ink all over the tattoo. The thing is you typically need to hit this design. it's not even a set number of times before the white starts
Is
to
it like
take.
5? Is it like a 500? Like
I would
somewhere
say
in
your
there?
minimum like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
And I think I'm not exactly sure what it's doing, but my theory is that you're just pushing that black ink molecule out over time, because there is also a tattoo removal method that uses needles to break the ink up instead of a laser.
Oh, wow.
So it breaks the molecule down so that it's small enough to pass through. So I guess I kind of think of that, and then this white over black theory where, you know, maybe that black ink is being hit enough times with those needles that it's breaking down the molecule so that it can pass through. So, but there are so many people tattooing now, and so many people getting tattoos and willing to get tattooed, that these theories, or all it took was one guy saying, hey, yeah, I'm willing to try that. Like, let's try and hit this thing, you know, 10 times with white ink and see if it starts to take. And it did. So and then now, you know, it's possible. Whereas before, no way, you can't put anything over black. You could put it over it, but after it healed, it was gone.
Right.
And the black ink was still there, right?
Sounds labor intensive.
I imagine you hear a lot of misinformation. Something I heard very early on in my life was if I were to see somebody with a tattoo on their face, maybe a teardrop or something, I would hear people say things like, oh, that person probably was in prison, right? Or that person's part of a gang, right?
Definitely.
And that sticks with you. That sticks with you for a long time, right?
Sure.
But then you see someone like Mike Tyson, who also has been in prison. no, but and anyways, where are we at with face tattoos, and what? Sorry, that's a really big question, I guess.
Sure.
It's a big question, but we're asking the best guy.
Yeah.
Well, they're very they're becoming more popular. These SoundCloud rappers that have them, they call them, like, who are Post Malone and I don't know, Tekashi 6ix9ine and Lil Pump. I just saw an Instagram post today. He got Tom and Jerry on each, you know, side of his jaw, right? So
big commitment.
Big must love that cartoon.
Yeah. Pretty
Sure that he wasn't that it was, you know, way before his time too, but, you know, trends, right? So face tattoos, I see them, not many in Waterloo. There are a couple fellows that I see walking down King Street regularly that have quite a few face tattoos. But yeah, I mean, I'd say the thing about where we're at now in society is it's really important to be accepting of everyone. So if a person has a face tattoo, you know, don't be so quick to judge.
This person's still employable, you know,
Employable.
dateable.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know,
Good to be your neighbor. Good to be part of the community.
If it's, you know, a nice face tattoo, then they probably paid good money for it, and you know, might have a nice piece of art on them, so they you know, probably have a job if they were able to afford that as well. But yeah, I they're definitely not common in my studio. I don't tend to get that, I guess, type of clientele or demographic of clientele that are getting face tattoos. I've had many inquiries, and they're often like, because I have quite a long wait time and we're an appointment only studio, these people tend to want them like immediately. So I'm like, man, you might want to chill out and think about that face tattoo for a bit before you know, jump into plastering it on your face. But
maybe that's the commitment. Maybe once you've decided, it's now
gotta
or never.
gotta
yeah.
get it now.
Yeah.
You know, whereas me, I'd wait for someone that I know is going to do a good job on it. So, because it's on my face and it's, you know, hard to cover. But I think that I think we're still maybe a generation away before there is absolutely no discrimination at all against tattooing, period. You still have the old boys clubs that aren't too keen on it, banks, airlines, things like that. It's getting better.
But even our police have lots of tattoos.
Yeah, police are totally allowed. I mean, you can't be the government says that you can't discriminate against tattoos in the workplace. They need to let their employees have them then. And yeah, you can have them. Actually booked OPP officer earlier this week for a half sleeve, and we chatted a bit about that. And he's like, yeah, I think, you know, you can pretty much have them anywhere now as an officer. He says he has coworkers with them on their necks and hands and things like that. A few years back, it used to be a rule that if they were in their dress garb, they couldn't be exposed. So
right, so like up to the neck.
Yeah,
to
that
the
meant
sleeve.
nothing on the neck, but I believe they wear white gloves, so if they were on their hands, it was okay. But now, anything, anywhere, totally okay. I have several clients that are Waterloo Regional and OPP.
I think you said it right there when it's going to be about a generation to
I think
age
we
out.
have one
Or
more.
hopefully about that
Yeah,
time. Marshall and I are
because-
of that age where both of us have tattoos, not as
Did you
beautiful
grow
as
up
yours.
with tattoo TV shows?
No,
There
I'm
you
43,
go.
right?
So
So, like my first tattoo, I walked into George's
Yeah.
on King Street downtown, and I was in a boys club, and I was 17 years old, and it was a joke that I was
They
in
were
there.
old.
But I was
they
ready,
were-
and I had cash.
They were kind of biker boys clubs. Right?
Totally.
That's how it was.
They asked me about 100 times, are you sure, little girl, kind of thing, you know? But they were kind, and it was
Sure.
great. But, you know, I was definitely in a boys club. I did not belong there at all. But I was, I felt good.
Mm-hmm.
It's a much older tattoo now. Doesn't look
Yeah.
like it did when I was 17.
Yeah.
But I hid it forever because there was a connotation to that.
Absolutely.
When I got two more, and that's all I have, my father-in-law, who's now 81 and who adores me and I adore him, was like, honey, this means something. Why? Because to me, you're a type of person if you do this. And I
Right.
said, well, these are the reasons why I did it. And that short exchange is what softened him to be like, tattoo
Yeah.
your face if you want, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
my mother cried when I got my tattoos.
My mom went
I
out
was
and
thir- I
got
was 30
one.
30 years old.
You
My
know,
mom was jealous and she went and got one, a tramp stamp,
I
actually.
think I got my first. I started with a 3/4 sleeve for my first tattoo, and
That's big.
yeah, it was. I knew I wanted sleeves, and I was like, I know that if the whole sleeve is thought out, you're gonna end up with a nicer looking sleeve. So
Instead of piecing together later.
yeah, exactly.
Can you show us which part
So
that was? I know it's
this
not great
is
for
this whole
podcasting, but
Japanese piece, right?
Right.
So it all flows together.
oh, it's beautiful.
Everywhere. So that's a 2006, I believe.
It looks great.
So
yeah.
13 years now. But yeah, my parents, just made sure that it's what I wanted to do, and that was it. They were okay with it.
Did it help having an
So-
artist mother?
Yeah, my
Yeah.
whole family's fairly artistic. My dad's very musical. My brother went to Sheridan
Oh,
for
great.
illustration. My mom, paints, yoga teacher, Thai yoga massage therapist, all those things. So she's definitely very artistic. She always had me and my brother enrolled in art classes as kids. So, that was something that we did for fun, which is why I think that my kind of transition into tattooing felt, even though it was a lot of work, it still felt like kind of effortless, even though I'm exhausted daily from what I do. It's still, worth it. I always, give myself a reality check and say I could, be back on an oil rig, or I've done concrete forming, I could be doing that or whatever. Instead, I'm, sitting in this chair, listening to the music I want to listen to and drawing on someone.
And running your own shop.
And running my own shop.
So are you the solo artist there? Do you have people
So
working with
I
you?
actually, as of a little over a year, trained my wife, Kim, to tattoo. So we tattoo together now. So we're kind of a husband-wife team.
That's wonderful. What a story.
Yeah, she worked for the Region for 8 years, realized that, it wasn't for her anymore. It wasn't for me either. I was sort of vicariously living that office job setting through her. And, we decided to make the decision to get her out of there and figure out what she wanted to do. And I, brought up tattooing, and, it seemed very foreign to her, or like kind of out of left field, but she had artistic ability already and she always liked drawing, but she had never, just like me, drawn with the intent on learning and getting better and it becoming your career. And since I had been through that, I knew that it was possible to go from, where you were as a casual sketching artist to someone that, can, do a realistic portrait on someone. It just takes putting your head down and doing the work and doing it again and again and again and again. And, and then maybe a few more times. And, every week or 2 weeks, I'm faced with, another animal portrait that I'm trying to make better than the last one. So I always have that intent when I'm learning. And if anyone does that with anything that they do, I feel like you can get better at it. A lot of people say, oh, you must have always been you must have always had natural ability to draw. And maybe it's because I enjoyed it so much that I did it more, and that's why maybe you thought I had natural ability. But to me, sometimes making that statement takes away from the fact that I've put, thousands of hours into studying the craft and getting better at it. So I might have more of a natural understanding, just like someone can pick up a guitar and figure it out easier. Now there are some physical attributes that can make playing guitar easier for some than others. I have huge palms and stubby fingers, so I'm not very good at playing the guitar. But maybe with some stretching exercises or something like that, I could get some more dexterity and play it better. So just like with drawing, well, you suck at drawing faces. Well, keep drawing faces then and keep studying them, but don't just draw and doodle. With an intent on trying to understand what you're drawing, and that will help you, get better at it. And art is all about the way you look at things, not about how you do it. Like if I can break down that section of, your face, say your nose, and right down to this tone of gray here and this tone of gray here and a highlight here and a shadow here, you're going to be able to create that nose, right?
Well, imagine what happens is someone comes to you and they may have, here are my two kids, portraits of my kids, right? Where I'm the biggest Britney Spears fan in the world, right? And what you do is take that photo, and I imagine what you're doing is you need to use something that's like an opaque projector, because you need to get this bang on. And somehow you get that onto, and then it's up to you to take it from there.
Actually, what I do is I'll pull it into Photoshop. So I do everything digitally now, 100%. I haven't put a pencil to paper in 4 years. It's all digital, iPad Pros for drawing, Photoshop on my iMac. With a portrait, you don't redraw a portrait ever. You make your stencil right from that image. So
I never would have thought that. I don't think I've watched enough tattoo
I'll
shows
I'll bring that portrait right into Photoshop. I'll adjust contrasts, because you also want it to make a good tattoo. If there isn't enough contrast, there won't be much staying power for that portrait, and over the years it could fade into nothing. So you want it to look good for a long time. So high contrast is always a good strategy for longevity of a tattoo. Pull it into Photoshop, and then actually I'll apply a filter to it that basically turns it right into a stencil for me. And then I actually print it right to a stencil. So
is that stencil at that point high contrast, and you're putting in the
it
rest
actually
of the details,
kind of converts it into a line drawing for me. So it'll map out the gradients and everything. And I often say, I'm kind of a professional replicator. The style of work I do, like black and gray or realism / surrealism, I'm typically using real imagery and then manipulating it in Photoshop and with the iPad, and creating what I want to see, and then it's kind of tattooed through my filter. So unless I'm doing a portrait, I'm going to make it look just like that. But if I'm creating an image, then I use that image and then I tattoo it in the way that I feel like tattooing. So I have a certain style, and people come to me for that, and I always say, if you like the work you see in my portfolio, that's what you're gonna get.
I imagine because of your integrity and the kind of the level that you're at in this way you've carved out your business for yourself, you don't see much in the way of somebody coming in with something that's subject matter wise is completely just not okay. Like where you just say, no way.
Not in my, well, I have had some people ask for these things, very few occasions, like I can count on one hand. But I
need to add, like, what kind of thing? My mind is going wild here.
SS bolts, like neo-Nazi stuff, FTP, like F the police.
Mm-hmm.
So like, well, my grandpa was a cop, man. So you know what? I'm not going to do that. You can go somewhere else. So, but I'll just deny them. It does happen, but it's very, very rare. We are not a walk-in studio either. A lot of people that want these tattoos, they're walking in and they want them done. I had a guy walk in a couple weeks ago that wanted a teardrop tattoo, like we were talking about earlier. And, I said, I can do it for you, but you're going to have to wait. I don't have time. Like,
what's your wait time like right now?
17 months. Wow. Is my wait now.
For the podcast listeners, my jaw just literally dropped. I was expecting you to say about like 4 to 5.
No,
that's nuts.
17
Good for you.
months. Yeah. So, but even a small piece like that. So I definitely take into consideration the pieces that I have each day, even though I might be able to bang out that little tattoo quite quickly. I'm there to give that day to that person that's waited a year to a year and a half to get that piece. So right. I don't want something else getting in the way that could affect what I'm going to be able to do for that client that's put the time in and waited.
Tristan, you do piercings as well. How do you fit that in?
No piercings.
Oh, no piercings?
No.
Okay.
So they do classify all tattoo shops under Google and Facebook and Instagram as tattoo and piercing.
Gotcha.
Oh, but you guys don't do it.
That's what
but we don't pierce. Yeah.
Okay.
So
there's lots of places
we get asked
handling
that all
that.
the time. Hey, I want a piercing, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, we don't do piercings. So why does it say you do? Well, I'm telling you I don't. So,
Should make it the first page of your website or
So
something.
I refer to Deacon at Wonderland Tattoo. He used to work at Torah, and he now and so did Wayne that owns Wonderland, and they work together now. And I feel that Deacon's I'm not super educated in it, but is probably one of the best piercers in town.
I've read reviews for stores in malls kind of thing.
Yep.
It can not always good.
Don't go. Yep. But I always refer people to him. So yeah.
Can I go way back here for a second? I don't have a pet. I'm not really a dog lover or a cat lover. I mean, I love them all, but I don't have one in my home. When you were talking about doing those pet portraits, all I could think about, and you were saying you want to get better at them and everything, all I could think about was all that fur and the light.
Fur
and
textures.
Yeah, these textures. And I know you're going directly from this Photoshop image, most likely. And I'm a Photoshop junkie, so I can try and visualize what you're talking about, making that stencil. How do you know when you're done? That seems like a lot of lines.
Yeah, you still want to kind of tattoo it in a way as well that is going to lend to the piece aging well. So, I mean, often you do it in clumps, right? When you're drawing hair or tattooing hair, it's lots of clumps of hair. You don't try and draw or tattoo each individual hair. One, it would drive you nuts. Two, it would not age well. When you run a detail like that too close to another detail, over time, the pigment does spread a little bit, out. Not a ton, but if they're too close together, those two details will now turn into one blob, right? And if you do that throughout the whole piece, you're just going to have one big blob of nothing.
So that detail's more suggestive for the eye then, or and lending to aging, like you're saying?
Yep. Yeah, if it's successfully done, it looks like hair and it looks like wizardry to anyone, but really you just took the main identifiers of what it is as hair and made it look like hair.
Wow.
I have a friend who years ago, he known for being very impulsive. Just never knew what he was going to do. But anyways,
sounds like fun.
I remember he loved certain painters like Jackson Pollock, right? And he showed up at my house one day and said, hey, I got a Jackson Pollock painting on my arm, right? Tattooed on my arm. And if anybody doesn't know what Jackson Pollock paintings are, they're known as drip paintings, basically splatter paintings.
Splatters, yeah.
And when I saw it, I said, I don't think anybody could possibly read that as a Jackson Pollock painting. Like, it just is a whole pile of scribbles and lines.
Yeah.
So there must be things that ideas people present to you where you just say,
oh, like this isn't going to work.
Yeah. Like, I'm pretty sure if I came to you and said, can you put a Jackson Pollock painting on my back, we'd be talking about that for a while.
Yeah, no, that's a good one to bring up, because we deal with it all the time. People come in and I don't expect them to know that it won't work well as a tattoo, because the way you view a tattoo on someone is typically at like a quick glance, as opposed to, it's not like your traditional painting that's framed on a wall that you can, stand at with, a hand on your chin and look at it for hours. It's typically a quick glance, not always from up close. It's usually far away. So you definitely want to make sure that things are readable as to what they're supposed to be. So we'll often, I'll always make things as large as someone will let me make them, because that, one, lets me get more detail into the piece. 2, also lets it, age better, and 3, makes it read better. Me and my wife saw a client that has a piece on her thigh that I did. We were at the Starbucks uptown Waterloo, and she was walking into Copper Branch.
Oh, that must be fun seeing your work out there.
And I could read that tattoo from across the street.
That's great.
And I'm like, that's, what I'm going for, right? Is I want to be able, I could see exactly, now I might not be able to see all the fine detail, but I could see what it was. Now, it probably helped that I knew what it was, but I could still identify it with, my eyes. So it's
the other things I think about are, I remember this was kind of on the internet for a while. So Dwayne The Rock Johnson has this huge tattoo.
Yeah, Polynesian.
Yeah, and it has all has to do with his background, his Samoan heritage. Yep. It's very personal. And then some white guy goes and
gets a
the
Polynesian
exact same
piece.
thing, right? And
I hadn't seen this.
Yeah, and also I've always questioned people who have no connection to any kind of Japanese culture or something, and all of a sudden a whole pile of writing. They've never been to Japan,
sure,
but something resonates with them, right? Do you talk to them about why are you?
Why are they getting this
piece?
Do I ask that?
And do they fully understand it?
I don't, because I feel like it's, that person's choice to get that piece if they want it. I'm dealing with adults, and, if they want it, and that's their place, I don't necessarily need to know the reason. A lot of people will tell me their stories.
An opening up sometimes, because usually tattoos are quite personal.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of the time the opening up happens during the tattoo, as opposed to during the consultation or prior. So it's kind of like being a barber, right? You hear everything, and I hear a lot of things about people that I don't know why they're telling me them, but I get their social security numbers, everything. I could definitely be an identity thief if I wanted to, but people definitely open up very easily on the chair. Probably part of it has to do with maybe the endorphin release that's happening while you're getting tattooed, because it's not brutal, but it's not comfortable. Some areas are brutal, but not to the point where you're dying in pain, rolling around on the ground. It's an annoyance that if you let it get to you, it's gonna get to you. But if you put it out of your head and work at that, you can. But yeah, definitely don't question people as to why they want certain things. I will often make suggestions to maybe improve their ideas. The Polynesian stuff that you're referring to that the Rock has, it's anytime he's definitely a role model to a lot of people, and people look at him for inspiration. He's a very hard, I think he is now like the highest paid actor in Hollywood, and no WWE/WWF. I come from the WWF days. was ever as successful as The Rock. Hogan made some movies, but not like The Rock, right?
Yeah.
Not Disney bangers.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't have what was Hogan's best, Mr. Nanny or something
Yeah.
like that.
So I'm just having a visual of that.
So,
Not good.
but yeah, I mean, and also carrying his wrestling name into his acting career, you know, keeping The Rock going with it. But, you know, back to the tattoo part, people are going to replicate that because, you know, they probably grew up seeing it on him all the time. And he's taken these Polynesian designs and exposed them to the world. That Moana movie that he was in, where he played the Maori guy, you know, that whole movie had a huge tattoo related subject matter in him, about because his tattoos moved and danced around on him, right? And so, you know, now you've got kids that are, I could see the Polynesian stuff getting more popular because now you've got kids that were exposed to this stuff at an early age that see it as cool.
Oh yeah, my friends' kids were drawing on their arms.
Yeah, they're
like,
going to end up with Polynesian pieces, right? So
it's and all art is copied in one way or another in some time or another. You know, like almost like how prints are made of famous paintings and that type of stuff. It's going to get copied.
Yeah.
At some point.
So, but there are certain things that, like, I think if you went to, you know, Hawaii or, you know, those areas where the Polynesian designs are still being done on the tribal people, there are certain ones that would be very offensive. Maybe all of them. I mean, because you have to earn them.
Oh yeah, does that become like an appropriation issue at some point?
So and I think in the East, like having Buddha's image on you is not okay.
Oh my gosh, how many Buddha tattoos are there out there?
Tons.
Yeah.
I have one. My wife has one. I've done many, you know. So, but here, even though we still like the philosophies of Buddha, we put him on us probably as a one, you know, how you walk into Home Sense, how many Buddha paintings are there that you can buy on statues? But here he is kind of like a symbol of like calm and peace, whereas there he's, you know, revered as a god. So
so that there already, we're already crossing that line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Crossing that line. So here it's okay. In Japan, if you have tattoos, you can't go in the public bathhouses. That's not okay. So they still have that.
Oh, do you still? I mean, I've never been to Japan, but I had seen something where also they're quite strict about bath and swimming pool, public areas like that. The rules, like there's shower caps for everybody, or bathing caps for everybody.
I'm not sure about that stuff, but I do know that if you have tattoos, you're not allowed to go into those places. So, and I think it may have, you know, originally had to do with the fact that anyone that was tattooed there was probably a gang member of some sort, whether it be
deemed dirty. Maybe it comes from something like that.
Dirty or who knows, but that's originally how they marked their criminals. They tattooed them so that you would know who a criminal was. And then after they got these marks on them and just decided to make them into these, you know, beautiful, elaborate, you know, full body tattoos, right?
Right.
Speaking of criminals, do you have any insight into how tattooing takes place inside prisons? Like how are they achieving that?
Yeah, they just get a hold of anything with a, you know, an RC motor of some sort in it. You know, whether it be a CD player, because it has or like a Discman that has the piece that spins, or a tape player or something, and then they'll get something sharp that they can file down, whether it be, you know, a guitar string or maybe even a tooth of a comb that they can file down fine enough. And all it takes to make ink is burning newspaper or magazines into soot and then mixing it with a carrier,
a pigment of some kind,
often conditioner or baby oil, and they just mix it in. It's because that's just carrying the soot into the skin, and then they'll dip. And there's been some, you know, phenomenal tattoos done in prison. I mean, they have a lot of time to work on these pieces, right? So.
Yeah.
What do you think of that whole trend of people like home tattooing, the stick and poke, I think
stick
they
and
call
pokes,
it.
yeah.
I would worry so
They're
definitely
good
about
for the
infection.
cover-up business.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
You know, it's getting an infection is harder than you think, because you're not going that deep with
I
the
guess
piece,
not,
right?
yeah.
And I mean, as long as they clean the needle or whatever, but I think the least thing they're worried about is an infection if you're doing a stick and poke. But I mean, you definitely have people doing it just because it is cool and trendy. There are, I think, I know there are several, artists, I believe, in Toronto that do stick and pokes professionally, and they're very busy.
Are they doing it
artists
with
and-
the proper machinery, or are they
Yeah,
doing
so what they do is they take a professional needle, and then instead of using it in your traditional tattoo machine that basically moves the needle up and down for you, they're just poking it, manually instead.
Do you think about your work in this way? So I'm a visual artist.
Mm-hmm.
I've done many paintings, and I've sold many paintings, and they find their way across the world. And
Yeah.
I have an idea where some of them are, and I have no idea where some of them are, or I find out 20 minutes later, right? Or,
Yeah.
sorry, 20 years later.
Yeah.
Or I could be surprised. It could end up in a Canadian House and Home magazine,
Mm-hmm.
So they have this life that kind of goes on. And I don't know how you can even wrap your head around your entire body of work is out there.
And where it is.
And also the whole idea that often artists kind of almost cringe when they see their early work.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
Yeah.
don't we all?
Yeah. Do you think,
Sure.
do you think about your body of work in that way, or is it not? Really,
Yeah, so I purposely leave every tattoo I've ever done on not every tattoo I've ever done, but every tattoo that I've posted, on my portfolio, and mainly I keep my portfolio on Instagram and Facebook. I leave from the first tattoo I posted on there to the present, because I will go back, scroll back, and look at those pieces, because as an artist, typically the way you'll progress is so slow and so gradual that you think you're going nowhere. So it's good to look back and reflect on the work that you did prior and now relate it to your current work. Not that the work that you did prior was bad, but it's more for yourself as a way to see that, you're maybe getting to where you want to be.
And how inspiring for someone else who might be interested to say, can I do this? When I get there,
where
and
this
to
guy
go back.
started,
Yeah.
right? I love it when an artist I look up to, shows back to maybe his first tattoo 20 years ago and then his tattoo now. And, shows, the struggle of, that we all go through as artists, to think, that, I'll do a piece that I'm proud of, and then when I'm done, I'm really proud of it, and then I'll go look at the pictures and I'll just be like, oh, it's not that good. You just beat yourself up on it, right? And you always look at, places that you can improve on it. So that's definitely something that you need to be prepared to live with and deal with, probably for your whole life as an artist. I feel like if you look at it and you're like, yeah, I'm awesome, this is the best, you're probably gonna stop improving. So I always try and look at it, and first I'll give myself, a critique of where I did some things well, and then I'll look for some areas of improvement instead of just thinking that it's awesome.
And that's in your own self-reflection. You're going through that
yeah,
process.
well, because
that's
I
very
worked by
developed in
myself.
advanced
I
behavior.
worked by myself for
Yeah.
4 years before I worked with my wife, and I'm my wife's mentor as a tattoo artist. So, her getting to the point where she can critique my work is maybe not there yet. I'll love it when she is at that point, because now, I've got a peer that we can reflect on our work together. She very much looks to me for, areas to improve and things to work on. I still will bring her over and say, hey, what do you think of this design? Or, does it look okay to you? To involve her in that process. And, she's definitely made some good, observations and things that I've changed. She also has that, like, every artist kind of has their own filter. So the way that, like, she sees it is different than the way I see it, because the way I'm seeing it is kind of the way that I'm going to tattoo it. Whereas she's probably seeing it as the image that it is. And if something looks off there, then she might be able to pick it out, whereas I think it looks fine because I've had my face buried in the design for hours, right? And
it's hard to see outside of it sometimes.
yeah, exactly. So it's good to have that, that it's good to give yourself constructive criticism. And I had to do it working by myself. I'd also often send my brother images of my tattoos, even though he doesn't tattoo. He would look at it with his, perspective of, I think he was at in Sheridan for 5 years, and
in illustration, you said?
Yeah, illustration, and
Yeah, I've seen the work. It's incredible.
yeah, he's a very, very good artist.
Well, let's say your brother's name. What's his name?
Mike Everett. So he does have
Pen
a
out here.
website, mike-everett.com, I believe. It's probably not updated because he's actually not practicing his trade. He's an electrician. But he did show some interest in tattooing, and has done some of his work on himself. And I basically just, here's the machine, here's how it works, go nuts. He's an extremely intelligent individual and would just figure it out. And he didn't need to be taught how to draw. He already knew how to draw. So it was pretty much like, you can bypass all the bull crap and just learn to tattoo, right? So
I'm kind of envisioning, I know nothing about this, but it's almost like learning how to use a power washer for the first time. Have you ever used one of those? Like you might know how to use a hose, but maybe when you turn on the power washer, you don't want to make powerful. A mistake.
Yeah, well, there's like the speed of the machine. So it's not just like an on-off. It is an on-off switch with it. It's operated by a foot pedal that we use.
Like sewing.
Yeah, pretty much. But there's what's called a power supply, which is basically like, if anyone knows what like a rheostat is, like a dial that adds voltage or moves it away, that controls the speed of your machine. The speed of your machine needs to be in kind of sync with the speed that your hand moves. So if you move your hand very fast when you work, your machine should be moving very fast.
It's exactly the same as sewing. I'm sorry. I don't mean to draw such a simple parallel, but it's the same thing.
Yeah. Well, because you'll run your stitches over each other, right? So, and then, I mean, obviously you got to make sure that you're not going to chew the person's skin up, right? Yeah. So like you don't just get to put the machine down, line up your line, and then start it. You actually have to have your hand moving, hit that line, and then pull it.
Okay, right.
So you can hover above and then get it in and move, but if you go
down and
hesitate, now you're gonna make a dot, like a big dot, and then you're also potentially gonna chew the person's skin up.
Oh, wow.
And then scar it, and then so you need to be moving all the time with it.
Never would have even thought of that.
It's always safer to train yourself to move your hand slow and move your machine slow. There's a lot more forgiveness there. Also, I used to be one of those, very fast moving artists, and I actually developed really bad bicep tendonitis from the repetitive motion because of how much I work. So I decided to change the way I tattoo and slow my machine down and then also slow my hand down. So I'm basically making less movements with my hand and letting the machine do the work. Because whether I have my machine moving fast and I scribble back and forth, or I slow it down and I just make like one slow movement, you're going to end up with the same result. So usually actually nicer if you move slower, I've found.
I actually got tendonitis from using the pen tablet for drawing in Photoshop for editing and doing those fine little movements. And it's quite painful. You can't even like get a coffee mug out of the cupboard or pick up a piece of paper.
I woke up one morning and I couldn't move my arm, and my neck was like all seized up, and yeah, it's weird because you actually feel it kind of in your shoulder blade, not your bicep, but it's because the tendon's so swollen and out of the groove that
Good thing your mom's at yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
As we start to wrap up here,
Sure.
where can listeners find you?
My Instagram is at Tattoos by Tristan. I have the Facebook page, so Iron Horse Tattoo Waterloo. Don't confuse me with the one in Buffalo.
I did find that one by accident the first time.
I had some clients that were like, "Oh man, what are you doing, Tristan?" But because the work was far different than what I do.
It was.
And we actually have an Iron Horse Trail where your parlor was
So
located.
that's the idea. Is I had a heck of a time trying to figure out what to name the place, and I was originally on Park Street, right by the Iron Horse Trail, and I'm like, let's just call it Iron Horse Tattoo.
And what I love about that is that trail literally connects the whole city. It runs directly to the
so
whole
I
city.
wanted to keep it kind of Waterloo. My family has roots here. You know, my grandpa was a cop, you know, Waterloo Regional back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, and we you know, my whole family, I can walk to my uncle's house, my mom's house, my dad's house, you know, and my studio, all from my house.
You're living the David Suzuki dream.
Yeah, definitely. Except I have my air conditioning on in the fall.
That's a little bit humid though. Sorry, did you get a second to say your website name?
I actually didn't bother with a website.
Okay.
I feel like social media is better, and then obviously the studio's just Iron Horse Tattoo. And if you Google me, you'll find me.
It's actually, you're right, because people can actually connect with you through those.
Yeah,
two.
I found it kind of redundant because I can also upload my portfolio instantly and interact with people.
There's just talking about your Instagram really quick. I know Marshall always tries to wrap us, and I just keep talking and talking.
That's okay.
There is an image on your Instagram, maybe about nine slides in, which is a portrait of a woman, maybe on the back of an arm, or maybe on the inside of an arm. Anyway, it blew me away, and I meant to talk to you about it because I was looking at it earlier today, and I said, to myself, I want to talk about this beautiful portrait of a woman with light streaking through it. It's so creative. And when I went back to look at it tonight, it actually doesn't have light streaking through it. It's just the way that I interpreted it looking at it, and there was so much beautiful light on her face, and her eyes were sparkling, and the way that her hair was falling. I was just thinking that there was light in there, and there wasn't, and I just thought that was such a beautiful subjective way of looking at this. I guess
I definitely captured the light source without kind of
knowing, maybe
physically tattooing the like light rays that you often see in those like high contrast or dynamic lighting situations, right? So,
I encourage everybody to check out your Instagram. It's absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if you're okay with waiting a year and a half for a tattoo.
and obviously my wife's Instagram is
tell us that too.
At Klee, so KLEE _tattoos.
Perfect.
So she does really like beautiful fine line work. Really enjoys that. It's like that etching style of tattoo.
Oh yeah.
So very good at that stuff.
We'll check that out for sure.
Sweet.
I want to thank you so much for coming, because it sounds like your
fun.
time is very precious. So for you to carve out this time for us, that's great. Oh yeah, right. Well, 17 months isn't a lot of talk.
Yeah, thanks, Tristan. Great to see you.
No problem.
Again.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
You have to come back with your wife.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks. Hey all, thanks for meeting us in Bonn Park. Please like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on the platform that you're listening to. And follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bonn Park Podcast. Original music by Alan Lung.